Welcome to a special edition of the Darden Admissions Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Melissa Thomas Hunt and Yael Grushka-Cockayne. Melissa is the Senior Associate Dean for the Residential Full-Time MBA program here at Darden, and Yael is the Senior Associate Dean for Professional Degree programs. I recently connected with them to talk more about highlights from this past semester, what they're looking forward to in the spring, their advice for prospective students, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here's my interview with Melissa Thomas Hunt and Yael Grushka-Cockayne. Melissa, Yael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brett.
Well, it's great to have you here. How's everything going, Melissa? How are you doing?
I was just saying that I am taking a breath. It's been a busy, fast-paced few months, and so it's nice to take a few moments to just sort of catch up a little bit, to reflect, and then there's some moments. So some of our first and second years in the full-time residential program are saying goodbye for a few weeks, and so there's always a little bit of sadness because I won't see them for a little while.
Yeah, this week is the first week that it's felt a little bit slower to me. I don't know about for y'all. Maybe it sounds like for y'all too. Yael, how are you doing?
Yeah, the same. It's been it feels like we've been running straight for months, and it's nice to feel some closure and some stuff. So I was teaching both our residential and our MBAs. Actually, at the same time, I taught the same course for both audiences, and it was kind of nice to progress with both audiences. And now everybody's, as you say, folks are on a break. The term has, I think, actually technically today is the end of exam period. So everything is due today for them, right. Which just means grading for us, but that will wait. So yeah, it's nice to have this 2023 come to a slow end, but it feels good. I'm excited about what's lying ahead.
Well, thank you both for taking some time out for the podcast. Thought it would be fun to look back on what's been as noted, busy fall semester here at Darden. So before we get too far into that conversation, though, I want to give our listeners a chance to learn a little bit more about you. So Yael, can I come to you first?
Sure.
I know you've been on the podcast a few times, and long-time listeners know a little bit about you. But for folks who are new, tell us more about you, your role, and what you do here at Darden.
Of course. Thank you, Brett, for always inviting me back. I feel like I haven't, I guess I was a reasonable guest if you keep inviting me back. You'll soon hear, actually, that both Melissa and I joined Darden at the same year, so we always like to highlight this when we're in these settings. 2009 was a good year for Darden. Both Melissa and I were joined together. We were the only two faculty that joined that year, so it kind of bonds us together. So I've been here at Darden since then. So I guess this is our 15th academic year, I guess. I came here straight out of PhD. So I completed my PhD at the London Business School, where I studied management science and operations. And my area of expertise here at Darden and in general is a field called decision analysis. At Darden, we call it quantitative analysis, which has some historic reasons for that name, but it's one of the only places where we really separate operations from decision analysis. And actually, my work is kind of on the boundary between the two, because I also do a lot of project planning and project management, which historically has been considered more of an operations area of expertise. But I do everything to do with strategic decision-making, forecasting, understanding risk and uncertainty, a lot about forecasting, especially in the context of projects. So how do you plan complex projects? How do you use, let's say, AI in that context, and so on. So that's my academic background. And then on this call, I'm more in my role here actually as a Senior Associate Dean for our professional degree program. So Darden offers several ways to get an MBA. We really offer primarily an MBA degree. Melissa will tell you on one way of getting an MBA, which her students experience, but the students that are under my responsibility are the ones that have full-time jobs and are taking their academics on in addition to, or in kind of more of a outside of the normal hours kind of framework. So students who take the MBA curriculum in the evenings and take classes or on the weekends with our executive format, but eventually get at the same place and obtain their MBA. Another program that is under my responsibility is an MSBA, a Master's of Business Analytics, which is a degree that we co-teach or co-deliver, I would say, with UVA's McIntyre School of Commerce. And the majority of the programs that are under my responsibility are delivered in Northern Virginia, where you most of the time are, and I think you are there right now. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's right. Greetings from Sans Family Grants here in Roslyn. So, Yael, you mentioned you taught project management to both residential and the executive MBA students this quarter. Any other classes that you teach that you would want to note here?
Most years I teach some decision analysis core class, depending on the audience. Sometimes it's for the MBA, sometimes it's for the residential. In the past, I've taught data science, business kind of more of a business analytics or applied analytics kind of courses. This year, I'm only teaching project management because I'm also going to teach a section for the part-time. So I have 3 sections for each one of our formats. So it kind of ebbs and flows throughout the years. I kind of experiment with a few other things, and I'll give a teaser, so we'll talk about it later. But we also teach and we accompany global trips, and both Melissa and I will tell you about that later in this conversation.
All right, something to look forward to. All right, Melissa, tell us a little bit more about you. Who are you, and what's your role here at Darden?
Yeah, I'll start with my current role. So, Yael is my counterpart in that I am the Senior Associate Dean of the Residential Full-Time MBA program. So that would be the MBA program format where our students come at the end of August and are sort of continuously present, like they are in residence in Charlottesville. Mostly they do a summer of internship away, and then they come back for a second year, and then they finish up in May. So the timeframes are actually the same. It's the residential piece that differs, and the fact that my students certainly start without having external employment, so that they can jump right in. So Yael said that we started at the same time, which we did. Our paths are a little bit different. So when I came here, I had been on the faculty of a couple of other places already. So I had been at WashU at the Olin School, and then immediately before coming, I had been at Cornell in the Johnson School, and happily came down to Charlottesville and to Darden. Interestingly enough, the primary reason that I was recruited at that time was to continue the legacy of negotiations teaching at Darden. And so came down and primarily taught negotiations, and then over time started teaching more of our core leadership and organization classes. And did that for quite some time and taught across the format. So taught in the executive MBA format as well as the full-time residential program. And at one point served as the Senior Associate Dean and Global Chief Diversity Officer here at Darden. I then took a little bit of a hiatus and did some work in the provost office at Vanderbilt University along the lines of inclusive excellence, and then actually had a 2-year stint on the executive team at Airbnb between 2019 and 2021. And one of the things that was most evident to me just being in corporate life was that we need great leaders and great managers. And I encountered many of them in my experience, but I knew a place where we do that really, really well. And I wanted to return and be part of that process. And so in August of 2021, came back to Darden to engage in the core, teaching leadership and organizations core classes with our first year MBA students. Did a little bit of teaching in the executive format, and dove back into my research agenda, which previously had been on teams and understanding how individuals' contributions of their expertise sometimes don't get used by teams and groups, and what are some of those factors that get in the way, and how can we mitigate it. And then also, more recently, studying connection in organizations and how being connected is an important part of the productivity that we hope to have for employees, and how can we actually create that and unleash that. And so I've been doing a lot of that over the last couple of years.
All right. Well, Melissa, I'm curious, what do you enjoy the most about your job, or what are some of your favorite things about your role at Darden?
Oh, hands down, it's engaging with students. There is a so our students are very generous and interesting and smart people, and so it's fun to be in conversation with them. It's also fun to appreciate that they see things in a way that I often don't, and it's refreshing to have respectful civil dialogues and to learn and grow, and hopefully for them to learn and grow. And I'm talking about outside of the classroom, not just inside of the classroom, but to really form what are, lifelong relationships with students and to be able to celebrate their successes over the time that they're in the program, but then also beyond. So hands down, engaging with our students is really the thing that's rewarding. It's the thing that gets me up in the morning. And when there are tough days and, we have long days and there's lots of work and lots of partners, knowing that we are ultimately here to educate and serve our students is what keeps me going.
Yeah, same question for you. What's your favorite thing about your role?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it would be hard to find a faculty at Darden that didn't say the students, meaning we do definitely pride ourselves in having extraordinary students, and it's a relatively small community, I would say, even with the fact that we have 2 locations and we have several different formats, it still feels pretty intimate in how we conduct our classes and how we get to know the students and just how we think about ourselves, including after they graduate as alumni. So it feels like it's just one extended family, a large family at this point, but an extended family. And so I definitely love the interaction and the relationships that I form with new students, with graduating students, students that I've had in my classroom, students who I get to work with more as an administrator, and our student leaders are always just so wonderful in how they give back to this community that it really gives us energy every day. I've enjoyed working with Melissa and working across the leadership team at Darden with other members of our leadership, both faculty and staff, trying to understand what does the landscape of the MBA look like tomorrow or in 3 years or in 5 years, and what does Darden continue to do or think about doing differently? And there's no real quick or easy answers to that, but those are actually sometimes very challenging questions, and I feel like I have good partners in trying to figure that out. So yeah.
Well, and I'll just say that so Yael has been in her role longer than I have been in mine. And I benefit from her ability to have been around some corners that I haven't been around, and to give I would say gentle guidance, but for those who know Yael, it's usually direct. But very much appreciated and helpful. And also, like, it's important that we also center our faculty members and our colleagues and understand, because they're so committed to what they do, understand their perspective and the larger context for like why we do things the way we do. Not saying that things shouldn't change, but we have to recognize and understand at least why we're currently doing them the way we are.
One thing that we've been really working hard, Melissa and I and others, and we're really lucky because we have great partners. Like we have a whole instructional design team, and they've been helping us figure out the generative AI wave, I would say, or movement or change or whatever you want to call it. And so we've basically spent the whole last 6 months kind of trying to understand the implications for what does it do to higher ed? How will students use it? How will faculty use it? How will they in ways that we want them to or not want them to? And so it's really been a challenge, but exciting to also learn new things and figure it out together. And so, together with Melissa and the rest of our faculty, we've learned so much in the past 6 months. It's just, it's fun to reflect on. So I'm happy to be here to reflect on it.
It's great because, I mean, there's always, and I don't know that this was our intention when we went into it, but there are sort of the meta benefit is that the faculty gets to be in community with one another. And coming off of the pandemic, it's been really nice to have a regular cadence to a conversation that brings us together. And so have really enjoyed that aspect of it as well.
Well, I mentioned at the start of the conversation here that I wanted to give you an opportunity to reflect on the past semester and talk about some of the highlights from this busy fall semester, these past few months. And Yael, are there a few things that jump out to you when you think about this fall semester?
Yeah, Yeah, there are a couple of things, and it's been a long semester, I must admit. I think it's been nice to see. So, as you know, Brett, and folks who follow your podcast can go back a couple of years. Our part-time format, the evening format, is fairly new or a young format, I would say. We only have a couple of generations in the house of students that are following that cadence, and it's been nice to get more of a critical mass. We now have two generations. We have first years and second years, so it feels like we have a community. We've structured their schedule so they can so they meet in person on site in the same weeks, and so that they can get to know each other. And next year we'll have a third cohort. So like it's nice to see those generations come in and that community become more robust. It gives them a sense of belonging. It gives them a sense of community, and it helps us make them feel as Darden as possible. So that's been super nice. It's also been nice to see. We've been working very hard across the whole organization to align calendars to allow our students to take courses with different format students. And so there are some students who travel up to DC to take classes with the executives. There are students who are taking between the part-time and the ExecMBA coming down to Charlottesville for what we call a J week in January to take intensive courses. So we have a whole cross-organization exchange, and that's great. Again, closing the gap and creating more of a tight community and things that it's been very nice to see come together after a lot of hard work on behalf of many people. And then finally, I would say, as mentioned, this has been the year of AI and generative AI, and I do some work in the area. So it's been nice to see the enthusiasm. We had a big AI conference just a few weeks ago in Sands Family Grounds. And it was exciting to listen to the conversation, some big questions that emerge around business and how businesses are going to embrace AI, where are the boundaries and the limitations going to be, what is the role of the regulatory body, how do we here at Darden with the ethics that we teach and our mindset that is centered on values and responsible leadership, what is the role that we play in that next generation of leaders? That's been a very active front, I would say, and maybe it relates a little bit more to my research than my teaching, but it's been nonetheless very exciting to be part of.
Yeah, we're recruiting the third class of part-time MBA students right now, as you mentioned. And when the first class started, just kind of excited to see them get started in the program. They're now entering quarter 9. They will have their second week-long residency in Charlottesville in just a few months, and then they'll enter the elective period. And it's kind of exciting to see them get to this point and the calendar and see some of the electives start to roll out for these students. You did an episode about the initial sort of planning around electives for part-time MBA students. You mentioned the January term, the J term, where I think we'll have full-time, part-time, and executive MBA students enrolled in several electives during that January term, which is great.
It's great. And it's really exciting to see how keen they are to get involved and to get to know the community and to embrace these opportunities. I want to say about a dozen, maybe 15 of them went to Italy earlier in the year, so they were able to go abroad. So our part-time students are really seizing these opportunities and experiencing more and more of Darden as well. And as you say, they're about to start their electives. I'm excited. As I mentioned, I'm going to teach them later in the year, and I think that they're very ready for it. So they'll be happy to get there.
Yeah, I love the fact that.
Oh, I was just going to say, my sense is that faculty are eager to engage with them and to teach them, which is always good to see.
It's excellent. Yeah, I love the fact that you will have taught residential students, part-time MBA students, and executive MBA students all in the same academic year. That's fantastic.
Exactly. It's a first for me, and I'm mixing it up a little bit, kind of to get that experience under my belt.
Well, Melissa, same question for you. What have been the highlights for you from this fall semester?
Yeah, I think there's some things that we have been focused on around finding more ways to help our students to get connected to one another. We know that, across all of the formats that we have a very intense, learning focused program. And so how can we be really deliberate? And so one of the things that we did in the full-time residential program was to create groups called Who Crews, where even before they came to grounds, there was an opportunity in groups of about 10 or 12 to engage in different activities, to get to know individuals who would be in their class. We promised that they would have opportunities to see and engage with them when they got to grounds. And in fact, we structured that in. And so just creating more of a runway for social interaction, so that individuals know people. They have, not only their learning teams and their sections that they can rely upon, but there are some alternative places that they can go and gather support and have some fun. And so it's been nice to see, and we've also provided learning team mentors for all of our learning teams, and across the 2 quarters, the learning team mentors, who are staff and faculty members at Darden, have been planning little events, like sort of surprising learning teams with goodies, or having a pizza lunch, or just checking in on them to see how they're doing. Because, at the end of the day, we are a community that cares. And so just finding more ways, given the complexity of students' lives, to demonstrate to them that we are here for them and that we're supportive of them. And so I've been really pleased to see that come to light.
Well, it's interesting to hear you mention the learning teams, the Who Crew. I also feel like, there's been some cultural shifts in terms of how learning teams engage with each other. I think it may seem small, but it's actually quite large. Historically, the learning teams met at night. But I think you've been encouraging the learning teams to meet during the afternoon, much more in the flow of the day.
Yeah, so learning team rooms are reserved starting at 4:00, and they go till late at night. We started with a suggestion of meeting, at 4:00 from 4 to 6, but also indicated that, depending upon the way members' lives are configured, that they would have to flex, that there would be different schedules based upon recruiting and other obligations, but that we wanted to have, the bulk of learning teams start off, so that they would do things around Darden, and then, some individual prep, some other things, and then they'd go into their learning team. And then they could potentially have their evenings for personal time and wellness, for engaging with their families, for additional individual prep. And so I think, there are a variety of configurations that exist. Some learning teams are actually still meeting, Sundays through Wednesdays in that slot that we allocated. And then others have chosen some other configurations. I think the important thing is for them to be on an exploration of how to work with individuals from, a diverse array, and to set goals for individual learning and collective learning that work for everybody. And for us to provide the support structure to help them and guide and nudge them, because the reality is that most of the work that they're going to be doing is in a group or team format in their internships and then afterwards. And so we're just trying to do more to support their development as good team members.
And it's such a great opportunity to practice those skills. It's nobody's technically in charge of the learning team. You have to figure out how you want to work together. You set your norms, hold people accountable. And, when we have students on Experience Darden talking about the recruitment process, what that looks like, and how they have to lean on their learning team members. And then, of course, they're the person that picks up the slack when someone else is going through the recruiting process. It's a very important, not just academic support, but just part of the experience here at Darden for students in terms of practicing some of these things that they're learning about in class. And of course, they're going to draw upon when they get out in the working world.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really a foundational managerial and leadership skill. And, we'd like to think that it's always going to be perfect, but it's not perfect in the real world. And we can't just sort of abandon ship. And so figuring out how we can have conversations with people, how we can represent our own interests, but also understand theirs, and how we can be flexible and agile, but still hold to our academic objectives. Those are really important skills that we're trying to instill.
The other thing I wanted to ask about was there's also some rethinking of the structure of the first year for full-time MBA students. Recently, it was three quarters of core, and then the fourth quarter was elective. Although right before the start of the school year, I think that was changed. So sort of the pacing of things, spreading out of some of the classes. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. I get to execute on that. So one of the things that we wanted to do is to be mindful of, some of the changes in the cadence of recruiting in particular. And so our core in its most recent instantiation used to be spread across 3 quarters. And then in the fourth quarter, for the most part, students were able to take first year electives. And to create more capacity in the fall, particularly in what's our quarter 2, and have a lighter course load, so drop it down to 4 rather than 5 classes, that necessitated spreading the core classes out over the year. So now core classes take place in quarter 1 through 4. In quarter 4, there are 2 core classes and the opportunity for students to take a couple of first year electives. And we also created the opportunity in quarter 3, which is earlier than I think it's ever been, for first years to also take at least one elective class then. So early feedback is that our first year students are appreciating the fact that they have more capacity for some of their personal wellness during quarter 2. But there's also the recognition that, recruiting is taking a significant portion of their time. And so we're exploring, we're gathering data and looking at metrics to really see if the change is delivering the outcomes that we had hoped for. So there's some early signs that it has, but I'm sure that there will be some future tweaks as well.
As always. Well, I'm curious, Melissa, what are you looking forward to in the coming semester, right? So J-term will get started in just a couple weeks, and spring semester will be off and running. So what are you looking forward to?
So I was delighted that in quarter 2 I got to teach 2 sections of negotiations, because it allowed me to reconnect with some of the first years that I taught in leadership and organizations core, and also get to know a whole array of students that I hadn't taught. And so that was exhilarating. But what it didn't allow me to do was to have sort of the high touch and high engagement with lots of the student organizations and their leaders, and to really spend time in community, going to as many of the student activities as I possibly can. And I certainly went to some, but I was teaching 2 nights a week. And so I'm really looking forward to just spending time with our students. One, because our first years are now going to be in their second semester. They know their way around. And I think they're going to be looking up to sort of see, like, what is next for them? What is it that they want to learn? How do they want to evolve as people, as leaders? And to be in conversation with them will be absolutely wonderful. And then our second years are looking to the future. And that's both a exhilarating time, but it's also a scary time. And for many of them, they're thinking, like, I'm leaving this community that I have become very fond of. And so I'm looking forward to having a little bit more capacity in my schedule to spend time with them. And I'm also looking forward to spending time with my colleagues. I just I haven't had a chance capacity to just walk the halls and pop in and have conversations and reflect with my colleagues. And that's just a really important part of what we do when you're in a community, so that you can understand how people think and how they're doing. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Also thinking about Yael's comment previously, do you have a global course in your future?
I do have a global course. I am super excited. We have lots of overlap here. So I am leading a Darden Worldwide course to South Africa in March. I have never been to South Africa. Our focus will be on transformation and change, and we will be in both Johannesburg and in Cape Town. And so I'm super excited, because we're now deep into the throes of planning, and I'm looking forward to going on sort of a journey with our students to reflect and to understand a society that has evolved considerably and has other challenges, but has many successes. And then to reflect in, like, what are the lessons learned for how we think about change and transformation, both personally, organizationally, and societally.
That's awesome. We had some executive MBA students go on a global residency there several years ago, and they had an incredible time. And some of them also came a little early, stayed a little bit late. Safaris were involved.
There's a safari. We're going to do a safari, a couple days safari beforehand. So I'm excited. I've never been on safari, so I think it will just be wonderful, and I'm so glad that the students are excited. And we'll begin in January to have pre-trip preparations and study various facets of the culture, so that we are prepared to just like consume, engage, meet people, reflect once we get there.
All right. Well, Yael, what are you looking forward to in the spring semester?
Well, I am also going to South Africa, interestingly enough. I'm going with our EMBA students, indeed, maybe 2-3 weeks before you, Melissa. When are you guys? You're going mid-March, I think, right? So we're going the last week of February. So there's a group of just over 20 EMBAs who are going, and I'm going to accompany them. And I'm excited. I've been to Cape Town. I've not been to Johannesburg, and I've been very keen to do a safari. So I'm super, super excited about it. It's going to be a great trip. Very interesting, kind of similar to a lot of the themes that Melissa laid out. And then from there, I'm going to continue straight to Casablanca because I'm meeting a group of our first year EMBAs for another trip. I've been to Morocco before. I was there last year with our executive format students. And so I get to go back, which is kind of nice as well, to go to a country for a second and third time, to once you know it a little bit and you can feel like you can really help the students get familiar with it and feel more at ease there. I'm excited about that and the opportunity that presents for me to go back. I have a lot of travel actually coming up next 6 months. I'm just booking some tickets and realizing. So as Melissa mentioned, we've been so busy with teaching and otherwise that and other obligations that we have. Now I can spend some time on my research. So I'm giving several talks and going all over to meet some colleagues, some interesting conferences that I'm part of the organizing team later in the end of the spring, early summer in Scandinavia. So a lot of fun travel. So this is the next 6 months of travel for me, which is going to be fun, exhausting, but fun and different because I've been primarily local for the fall. So yeah.
As I say, you remind me, I think I'm a little bit in denial because it's been so many years in the making, but I have a book coming out in January.
Right.
So I am excited about that.
Tell us more about the book that's coming out in January.
It's called Inclusion Unlocked, and it explores leadership capabilities for being an inclusive leader. And we showcase interviews with executives and bring in theory from management and social psychology and some of our very own practice to help others on their journey to think through how do you become an inclusive leader and why is it important?
All right. So starting off the new year with a bang, a brand new book. That's awesome. Yeah, I have to say the last global residency that you took students to Morocco, it feels like everybody we've had on the podcast, everybody we featured on the blog was somehow on this global residency. And I know you only travel with like 30 students, so I don't know how this is possible.
They were the vocal ones. Yes, you got the vocals ones. We had a great trip last year. It's funny when you travel with students, we are all a pretty tight-knit community, and some of that tight-knit community comes from what we do in the classroom. So a lot of voices get expressed and opinions, and people talk and they get to know each other. We like to, we also spend a lot of time together outside the classroom, like in meals and socializing and so on. And so we get to see the students in other lights, if you will, and other kind of settings. And traveling is yet another way to get to know the students and for them to get to know each other and us. I often joke with the students at the end of a trip to say, you think you know somebody until you wake up in the morning and see them first thing and go to sleep and you just saw them. And then you get a whole different perspective on people and their lives and who they are. And it's kind of nice for that. When you travel with first years, so the group I'm going to take to Morocco, it's all still new. They don't know each other that well. Like they've only been together a couple of semesters or a couple of quarters, actually only one semester. And so it's really, they're only at the beginning, a first quarter of the program under their belt. It's all very new and they're getting to know each other. When you travel with your second years, that's a totally different ballgame. And so when I'm going to South Africa, I'm with our second years. They know each other really, really well. In some cases, they know each other's spouses, and they've all kind of traveled together already. And then I'm going to go with the first years, so that's going to be new. So I'm excited about that kind of dichotomy, if you will. But it's also nice to see them go through that and get closer to each other and create those bonds for life that come out of our program.
Yeah, that first global residency travel period for the executive MBA students is about 6 months into the program, and it's still very early in that journey. And right after quarter three, after they've had accounting, finance, and leadership communication. So, I would say that's probably one of the first times where the groups that come back from those early global residencies, they do feel very bonded to one another. It does seem like one of those moments in the program where they really started to cement some of those relationships because they've just gone to Morocco or Spain or some of the places that we've been early on in the program.
Exactly.
The last question I have for Yael before we kind of transition to sort of a few final thoughts. You will have taught project management to full-time executive MBA and part-time MBA. Do you think about structuring that class differently depending upon which of those audiences you're teaching? Or is it largely the same class, just different audiences?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brett. By and large, it's similar. I do try and I am thoughtful a little bit about the time and the way that they have to study. So, for instance, our part-time students or our EMBA students, they're busy during the day, they work, and so they have full-time jobs. And so I need to be a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of prepping them and getting the materials out. And so whatever I need them to do in terms of prep for class or exercises or submissions, I need to be thinking about how that's going to be, how they can actually cope with it and how it will fit in with their lives. Not that our residential students don't require that. They also have full lives, mostly of their own doing, but they're also very busy. They run the school in so many ways. They have their own clubs and agenda, and they're very busy, and they do amazing things, and some of them are recruiting. So I'm respectful of our residential students, but they are a little bit more present, and they live slightly more in the moment, if you will. So preparing one day for the next because their life allows them to do it maybe a few days in advance. And, I don't want to generalize, but so some of the cadence and the pacing of the course and therefore the materials and when they kind of consume them, some of that I have to adjust. But the way that I teach project management is always fairly strategic. So I never assume that I'm teaching a different level of a leader in the organization. Even for our residential students, who are maybe some of them a little bit earlier in their career, I'm still catering my course for when they are a little bit more senior in their organization to give them that strategic perspective. I'm not trying to give them, like the expectation that they are the project managers that have to go through the PMP. I'm not teaching at that kind of level. I am trying to teach to pull it upwards to be more strategic in its insight, just because I think that that's really what other people around the organization are going to expect any MBA, any of our MBAs, regardless of the format, to do and to have that vision. And so I don't really see a huge difference. Sometimes you'll see a difference in terms of what projects they choose to focus on as part of their deliverables. Our executive students are much more inclined to have projects that are work related in context that they're already maybe doing. Our residential students tend to plan, maybe more of them plan their personal life projects, trips, weddings, events, moves, and so on, just because maybe they don't have as much of something pressing at work to plan. But those are the major differences. Otherwise, it's fairly similar.
Melissa, I know you've taught residential students as well as executive MBA students. Does Yael's points here resonate? How do you think about teaching same topics, say negotiations, to these different audiences?
It absolutely resonates. I think with negotiations, there are negotiation fundamentals. Like there's a structure to it. There's sort of research based upon that, and that's applicable across different contexts and and across levels. And so really the different thing that I'm doing is leveraging the experience and what's top of mind and what are the challenges that a particular audience has, and helping them to unpack with their newly found or honed negotiation skills how they should be thinking about it. And so at the core, it's the same, but it's the level of the conversation and the sort of nuance of the conversation that tends to differ across the formats.
All right. Well, last question for y'all. We've got a full-time MBA deadline coming up in early January. We've got an executive MBA deadline, January 10, another part-time MBA deadline on February 1. Melissa, any advice that you would share with our listeners as they think about their own MBA journeys?
Yeah, I would encourage them, to really do their research, and in particular, as they're investigating Darden, to really get a sense of, what does it mean to be part of this community? What does it mean to learn in a student-centered environment? And for them to think about, not only who they are, but, what they've done and where they think they want to go, and to really express that as they are communicating with us, so that we and why Darden specifically. It's a unique and wonderful place, but it will be great for them to authentically engage and sort of expound upon like why this is a place that they think they would thrive.
Yeah, that's great advice. We're always listening for things about the experience here that are personally resonant with the student beyond just a top program or that kind of thing. Something that you actually sort of spent some time with and really processed what it would mean for your experience here at Darden. Yael, a piece of advice for our listeners as they think about their MBA journeys.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the more powerful ways to identify if you're in the right place is, of course, they're going to talk to you or your colleagues in the admissions. I'm not saying you guys are not amazing, which you are, but you are in admissions. So they need to recognize that. We are faculty. We also work here, but they need to talk to the students and the alumni. They need to talk to people out there in the community. They need to talk to employers and other people who can give them as many different perspectives and experiences as possible. Really, our students and our alumni are our best ambassadors, because those with a few years experience, those even recent alums, they can tell a student really what to expect from sitting in their seat, right? Being in and going through that sometimes we cannot describe as accurately. Faculty are always happy to engage and get to know students as they're thinking about applying. We love to share our expertise and, kind of tell you more about it, have guests in our classroom and showcase the method and the style. I hope that folks who are considering Darden take us up on all these opportunities to do so, because really there's no end to how much you can experience Darden before you come, which is good. I mean, we do that on purpose because we know that people who come here will fall in love with it, but also it will help close that gap and make sure that when you do show up and you're ready to matriculate, you know what to expect, and that's the best case scenario. Yeah.
Agreed. We have class visits for all of our programs, and if you can make it work, strongly encourage you to come spend some time with us. It's a great opportunity to see the case method in person. You get to meet a whole bunch of current students and just get a feel for the culture of the place. I think one of the hardest things for prospective students is every school kind of sounds the same on its website, but at a community level, at a cultural level, all of these schools are very different from each other, and no better way to get a feel for that than just come spend a little time sitting in a classroom.
100%.
Well, Melissa, Yael, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for doing this effective year wrap-up show, semester wrap-up show. It's been great talking with you, and I hope you and your families have a very happy holiday season.
I feel like we're like the frequent hosts on Saturday Night Live. They bring us in for the Christmas special.
Brett, thank you for having us.
Thanks, Brett.
I appreciate it. You have a restful break and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
And that was my interview with Melissa Thomas Hunt and Yael Grushka-Cockayne, two senior associate deans here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's CARDEN, @virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and have a happy holiday.